Imagine the heart of a North American winter centuries ago. The temperature plummets to 30, 40, even 50 degrees below zero. Blizzards rage for days, piling snow into impassable drifts. The wind is a knife. For you, in your modern home, it's a scene you watch from the comfort of your heated living room. But what if you had to live in it? What if your survival, and the survival of your entire family, depended entirely on your ability to create a pocket of warmth in this frozen wilderness? No hardware stores, no fiberglass insulation, no central heating. This was the reality for the indigenous peoples of this continent. And they didn't just survive these winters, they thrived in them. They built homes that were not just shelters, but sanctuaries. They were so effective, so ingeniously designed, so deeply comfortable, that you have to ask the question, how did they do it? What secrets of architecture and insulation did they possess that we, with all our technology, have only recently begun to rediscover? The answer is a story of profound intelligence, a deep generational conversation with the land itself. It's a story not of conquering nature, but of collaborating with it. This is the story of how Native Americans built the coziest winter homes the world has ever seen. To understand these homes, you first have to understand the philosophy behind them. This wasn't just construction. It was an act of profound reciprocity. The land provided materials, and in return, the people treated those materials with respect, understanding their properties, their spirits, and their potential. Every tree, every piece of bark, every clump of earth was a partner in the great project of survival. There was no waste. What wasn't used in the frame became fuel for the fire. What wasn't used for insulation became bedding or clothing. This cyclical, respectful relationship is the foundational layer of coziness. It's the spiritual insulation that preceded the physical. And this relationship was not monolithic. Across the vast expanse of the continent, from the snow-locked forests of the Northeast to the icy plains of the Midwest and the high, arid deserts of the Southwest, different nations, with different cultures and languages, faced the same elemental enemy, the cold, and they all arrived at brilliantly adapted solutions. The Iroquois and their neighbors in the Northeast built the longhouse. The Lakota on the plains perfected the Tipi for a mobile life. The Pueblo peoples of the Southwest constructed vast, intricate apartment-like complexes from adobe, and in the subarctic expanses, the Inuit and Aleut peoples engineered the igloo, a masterpiece of snow architecture. Each of these structures is a testament to human ingenuity, a textbook on sustainable living, written not on paper, but in wood, earth, and snow. Let's begin our journey in the great deciduous and coniferous forests of the Northeast, with one of the most iconic and communal of all winter dwellings, the longhouse. We often think of the longhouse as a singular structure, but its true genius lies in its scalability and its social function. These were not just homes. They were villages under one roof, sometimes stretching over 300 feet in length. Imagine an entire community, multiple families, all living together through the long, dark winter. The very concept speaks to a social coziness, an understanding that warmth is more than just thermal. It is communal. It is shared. It is the heat of human connection. The construction of a longhouse was a communal effort, a gathering of the clan. The first step was always the frame. Large, flexible saplings, usually of elm or cedar, were chosen for their strength and pliability. These saplings were not cut down haphazardly. They were selected with an eye for the future growth of the forest. The builders would drive 2 parallel rows of these saplings into the ground, then bend them inward, tying them together at the top to form a series of soaring, graceful arches. This created a tunnel-like structure, a long curved rib cage that was inherently strong and stable. This arch design is crucial, and we'll see it again and again. It's a shape that nature itself uses for strength. Think of an eggshell or the dome of your own skull. It distributes weight evenly, and most importantly for a winter home, it sheds snow beautifully. A flat roof would collapse under the weight of a heavy snowfall, but this curved roof allows the snow to slide off or pack down evenly, actually becoming an additional layer of insulation. Once the skeleton was in place, the real magic of insulation began. The frame was then meticulously woven with a lattice of smaller branches, creating a tight, sturdy grid. This grid was the foundation for the walls, and here is where the true ingenuity of the longhouse becomes apparent. The outer skin of the longhouse was most commonly shingled with sheets of bark, but not just any bark applied any which way. The preferred material was the bark of the elm tree, peeled in great thick sheets from the tree in the spring when the sap was running, making it easier to remove in large, flexible panels. These sheets were enormous, sometimes measuring several feet wide and long. They were then carefully lashed to the wooden frame using cords made from the inner fibers of trees, what we know as sinew or from tough, fibrous plants. Now, imagine this for a moment. You have a wooden frame covered in a layer of bark. In a modern house, we'd call that the siding, and we'd then put insulation inside the walls. But the builders of the longhouse went much, much further. The bark was only the first weather-resistant barrier. Behind it, in the cavity between the outer bark and the inner living space, they would pack a thick, dense layer of insulating material. What did they use? Whatever was most effective and readily available. This could be a loose, airy stuffing of dried grasses, moss, or the most common and incredibly effective insulator, cattail fluff. Cattails are a wetland plant, and in the late summer and fall they're brown. Sausage-like seed heads are packed with millions of tiny, fluffy seeds attached to delicate down-like fibers. These seed heads were harvested in vast quantities. The fluff was collected and packed densely into the walls of the longhouse. If you've ever held a cattail seed head and seen how the fluff explodes out, light as air, you can begin to appreciate its properties. This cattail fluff is a phenomenal insulator because it traps a massive amount of still air within its tiny fibers. Still air is one of the best insulators known to man. Our modern fiberglass insulation works on exactly the same principle. It's not the glass fibers that keep you warm, but the layers of still air they trap. The native builders understood this principle intuitively. They were creating, in effect, a thick natural down jacket for their entire home, but the insulation didn't stop at the walls. The same materials were often used to create a kind of double-layered roof, or were packed into the overhead framework. On the floor, they created a raised sleeping platform that was also insulated with layers of bark, mats woven from rushes, and then piled high with furs and hides. This elevated bed was crucial. Cold air sinks, and the ground is a perpetual source of dampness and cold. By sleeping on a raised, insulated platform, they lifted themselves out of the coldest stratum of air inside the dwelling, creating a microclimate of warmth for sleeping. Now, we come to the heart of the home, both literally and figuratively. The fire. A longhouse typically had a series of fire pits running down the center of the structure, spaced evenly between family compartments. These were the primary source of heat and light. But the management of this fire and its smoke was a critical piece of engineering. You might think that a long enclosed structure with multiple fires would quickly fill with deadly smoke. This is where another stroke of genius comes in: the smoke holes. In the roof, directly above each fire pit, was a smoke hole. But these were not just simple open holes. They were often complex, adjustable baffles. They were designed with a kind of cap or shield, usually made of bark that could be shifted or tilted using a long pole. This allowed the occupants to control the draft. By adjusting the position of the smoke hole cover, they could create an updraft that would efficiently pull the smoke straight up and out of the building, while allowing just enough of a draft to keep the fire oxygenated. On a windy or stormy day, the cover could be positioned to block the wind from blowing snow or rain down the hole, while still allowing smoke to escape from the sides. This was precision climate control, achieved with a simple, elegant understanding of airflow and thermodynamics. Let's pause and paint the full picture of a longhouse in the depths of winter. Outside, the world is a monochrome of white and gray, the wind screaming through the bare branches of the forest. Inside, the air is still and surprisingly warm. The thick walls of packed cattail fluff and bark hold the heat from the central fires like a thermos. The floor is covered in woven mats and furs, absorbing sound and adding to the sense of warmth. The light comes from the flickering orange glow of the fires, casting dancing shadows on the curved wooden ribs of the ceiling. The air smells of wood smoke, of cooking food, of tanned hides, and of the earthy scent of the packed insulation. You can hear the crackle of the fires, the soft murmur of conversation, the sound of someone grinding corn, the laughter of children playing on the warm platforms. It is a space that engages all the senses in an atmosphere of profound security and comfort. It is, by any definition, cozy. But the longhouse was just one solution. As we move westward, onto the vast open grasslands of the Great Plains, the challenge changed dramatically. Here, the people were not sedentary farmers living in permanent villages for the winter. They were hunters following the massive herds of bison that were their lifeline. Their winter home couldn't be a fixed structure of wood and bark. It had to be portable. It had to be packed up, moved, and reassembled quickly in a new location. And yet, it still had to provide impeccable protection from the brutal, windswept cold of the plains winter. The solution they developed is arguably one of the most portable and efficient shelters ever devised by humankind: the Tipi. And I know what you're thinking. A tipi is just a cone of wooden poles covered with animal skins. It seems simple, almost primitive, but that perception could not be more wrong. The tipi is a masterpiece of aerodynamic and thermal engineering. The word tipi itself comes from the Lakota language, meaning they dwell. And the way they dwelt within it was a science. Let's start, as always, with the frame. The poles were not just random sticks. They were long, straight, and seasoned poles, usually of cedar or pine, prized for their strength and lightness. The number of poles varied, but a typical family tipi might use between 12 and 20. The arrangement of these poles was a precise art. The first 3 or 4 poles were tied together at one end and then raised to form the primary, stable tripod foundation. The rest of the poles were then laid into the notches created by this tripod, creating a perfectly symmetrical cone. This conical shape is the first key to the tipi's weather resistance. On the open plains, the wind is a constant, powerful force. A square or rectangular structure presents a flat face to the wind, creating immense pressure and drag. A cone, however, presents a curved, sloping surface that the wind must flow around. It is aerodynamically stable, able to withstand winds that would flatten a more rigid-looking structure. It's the same principle behind a rocket's nose cone or the shape of a tornado. It manages the energy of the wind rather than fighting it. Once the pole frame was secure, the cover was laid on. This was not a single heavy piece of material. It was a carefully engineered envelope made from the prepared hides of the bison. For a winter tipi, these hides were often sewn together by the women, who were the owners and architects of the home, to create a cover that was thick, robust, and large enough to provide a durable outer shell. The average tipi cover might require between 15 and 20 bison hides, all meticulously tanned, dehaired, and smoked to make them soft, flexible, and waterproof. The process of tanning itself was a days-long chemical process using the animal's own brains and liver, followed by smoking, which impregnated the hides with creosote and other compounds that repelled water and prevented rot. Now, the covering process was a communal lift, a task for several people. The cover was draped around the pole frame and then pinned together at the front with wooden lacing pins. This created the distinctive triangular shape of the door. But the cover was not fixed tightly to the ground. This is a critical detail. The bottom edge of the tipi cover was left loose. Inside, a separate interior liner was hung. This liner, made of thinner hides or even woven mats, was attached to the poles about 4 or 5 feet from the ground, and its lower edge was tucked under the bedding and belongings arranged around the interior circumference, or it was weighted down with stones. This creates what is known as a double wall system. The outer cover and the inner liner create an insulating airspace between them that runs all the way around the interior of the tipi. Now remember the central fire. As the fire burns, it heats the air inside the tipi. Hot air rises. When it hits the sloping ceiling of the tipi, it is directed upwards. At the top of the tipi is the most recognizable feature, the smoke flaps. These are 2 adjustable flaps controlled by long external poles. The occupants could move these poles to precisely orient the smoke flaps according to the wind direction. Here's where the system becomes a brilliant, self-regulating ventilation and heating system. The rising hot air carrying smoke exits primarily through the opening at the top controlled by the smoke flaps. As this hot air exits, it creates a draft. This draft pulls fresh, cold air from outside in through the gap at the bottom of the tipi, between the outer cover and the ground. But this incoming cold air does not simply rush in and chill the occupants' feet. No, it is immediately drawn into the space between the outer cover and the inner liner. As this cold air travels upward through this insulated channel, it is warmed by the heat radiating from the inner liner, which is itself being warmed by the interior space. By the time this fresh air circulates up and over the top of the inner liner and enters the main living space, it is already pre-warmed. It's a primitive passive heat exchanger. This system constantly circulates air, providing fresh oxygen for the fire and the people, while efficiently removing smoke, all without creating a cold draft. It's a system that modern architects and engineers study for its elegance and efficiency. On a cold, still day, The liner could be lowered to the ground, sealing the bottom and turning the teepee into a super-insulated, heated tent. On a warmer, windy day, the system could be adjusted for maximum ventilation. This was dynamic, responsive architecture. Inside, the floor was often covered with layers of hay or sagebrush, topped with thick, luxurious bison robes. The back of the teepee, opposite the door, was typically the sleeping and living area, raised slightly on more robes and mats. The fire was central, and around it, life unfolded. The hide walls would glow with the light from the fire, and the sound of the wind outside would be a dull hum, transformed from a threat into a mere backdrop, a testament to the security of the shelter. The teepee was a warm, dry, and remarkably comfortable home in a landscape that offered no natural shelter at all. Its coziness was born from its portability and its perfect adaptation to a nomadic way of life, a testament to the fact that home is not always a place, but a structure you carry with you, both physically and in your heart. From the portable perfection of the teepee, our journey takes us next to a seemingly opposite extreme: the massive, permanent, and awe-inspiring architecture of the Pueblo peoples in the American Southwest. When we think of the Southwest, we often think of searing heat. But the high deserts of New Mexico and Arizona are a land of extremes. Summers are blisteringly hot, but winters can be bitterly cold, with nighttime temperatures plunging well below freezing and winds howling across the mesas. The solution here was not a lightweight, portable structure, but one that was rooted deeply in the earth itself. They built with the earth. Their primary building material was adobe, a simple mixture of earth, clay, water, and a binding material like straw or grass, formed into bricks and dried in the sun. The Pueblo peoples, including the Hopi, Zuni, and the people of the Rio Grande valleys, constructed vast, complex, multi-storied villages that the Spanish later called pueblos, the Spanish word for town. These were not random piles of mud bricks. They were meticulously planned, often built into the sides of cliffs or on the tops of mesas for defense. But this placement also had profound thermal implications. The architecture was a direct response to the climate, and its effectiveness is still admired today. The principle behind adobe's effectiveness is called thermal mass. Materials with high thermal mass, like earth, brick, stone, and concrete, have the ability to absorb and store large amounts of heat energy. Think of a stone that has been sitting in the sun all day. Long after the sun is set, the stone will still feel warm to the touch because it has absorbed that heat and is slowly releasing it. Adobe works in exactly the same way. During the hot summer days, the thick adobe walls absorb the heat from the sun, preventing the interior of the dwelling from overheating. Then, as the cool desert night falls, the walls slowly release their stored heat, warming the interior. Now, reverse this process for winter. During the short, relatively mild winter days, the low-angled sun would still strike the walls, warming them. The walls would absorb this solar energy. Then, during the long, cold winter nights, the walls would radiate this stored heat back into the living spaces, acting like a giant, passive radiator. The thicker the walls, the greater the thermal mass, and the more stable the interior temperature. Pueblo walls were often several feet thick, creating an incredibly stable thermal environment that moderated both the extreme heat of summer and the extreme cold of winter. But the design genius went far beyond just thick walls. The entire layout of a Pueblo community was a lesson in environmental design. The structures were often built in a stepped-back fashion, like a giant staircase, with the roofs of lower levels serving as plazas or terraces for the levels above. This compact, multi-storied design minimized the surface area exposed to the harsh external environment, reducing heat loss in winter and heat gain in summer. The orientation of the buildings was also critical. While they were often built into south-facing cliffs for shelter, the individual dwellings were carefully positioned. Doorways and windows were typically small, not just for defensive purposes, but to minimize heat loss and to control the amount of direct sunlight entering a room. In the winter, the low sun could penetrate deeper into the rooms, providing direct solar gain. In the summer, with the sun high overhead, the small openings and deep reveals of the windows kept the interiors shaded and cool. Inside these adobe structures, the coziness was of a different character than the longhouse or teepee. The air was still and quiet, the temperature remarkably constant. The floors were often made of packed earth, sometimes covered with woven mats. The walls were plastered with a smooth layer of adobe mud, which could be whitewashed to reflect light. Heat came from small, carefully managed fire pits, often with sophisticated flues to direct smoke out of the living area. The heat from these fires would be readily absorbed by the massive walls, which would then release it slowly over hours. You could bank a fire at night, and the walls would keep the room warm until morning. The sense of shelter was profound. It was a coziness born of mass and permanence, a feeling of being protected by the very earth you stood on. It was a home that was quite literally part of the mountain, a cave crafted by human hands offering a deep, resonant, and enduring warmth, from the massive earthworks of the Pueblo to the frozen north. We now come to what is perhaps the most iconic and seemingly paradoxical of all winter shelters, the igloo. Built by the Inuit peoples of the Arctic regions of Alaska, Canada, and Greenland, the igloo is the ultimate expression of building with what you have. And in the treeless, windswept tundra, what you have is snow. To the untrained eye, a snow shelter seems like a desperate last resort, a place you would freeze to death. The reality is the exact opposite. A properly constructed igloo is one of the most effective and warmest winter shelters ever built, capable of creating a life-saving temperature differential of 70 degrees or more between the inside and the outside. The secret, once again, lies not in fighting the environment, but in using its properties intelligently. Not just any snow will do. The ideal snow is wind-packed, dense, and firm. It must have structural integrity, like a compacted snowdrift. The Inuit builder would probe the snow with a long, sharp spike or knife, listening and feeling for the right consistency. Once a suitable site was found, the construction began, and it was a swift, efficient process honed by a lifetime of practice. The igloo is built from the ground up, using blocks cut from this dense, compressed snow. The blocks are not rectangular, but trapezoidal, wider at the bottom and tapering slightly inward at the top. They are cut with a snow knife, traditionally made of bone or ivory, now of metal. The builder begins by laying a circle of these blocks. Then, as the walls rise, each subsequent course is laid in a continuous rising spiral. This is a key point. The igloo is not built in horizontal rings, but in a single sloping spiral. This gives the entire structure an incredible monolithic strength, as each block is locked into the one below it by the spiral pattern. As the walls rise, they are leaned inward, creating the beginning of the dome. The builder, working from the inside, carefully trims and shapes each block so that it fits snugly against its neighbors, with all the joints leaning inward. This creates a classic corbelled arch where each block is supported by the one beneath it all the way to the top. The final key block at the very top of the dome is placed from the outside, locking the entire structure together. The result is a perfect hemispherical dome, and as we've already discussed with the longhouse, the dome is nature's perfect structural shape, incredibly strong for its weight and able to shed wind. But snow. How can snow be warm? The answer lies in the physics of insulation. Snow is not just frozen water. It is a matrix of tiny ice crystals and, crucially, a massive amount of trapped air. Fresh, fluffy snow can be up to 90 or 95% air. This makes it an excellent insulator. It's like a natural foam. The dense wind-packed snow used for igloo blocks has less air, but it's the assembly that creates the insulation. Once the dome is complete, the builder goes inside and lights a small blubber lamp or starts a small fire. The heat from this source, combined with the body heat of the occupants, begins to warm the interior. This is when the magic happens. The inner surface of the snow walls begins to melt slightly, but it doesn't drip. Instead, the water seeps a few millimeters into the wall and then refreezes, because the outer layers of the wall are still at ambient temperature, which could be 50 below zero. This process creates a solid, glazed layer of ice on the interior of the igloo. This ice glaze is strong. It reinforces the structure, and it is impermeable to air and wind. Most importantly, it seals all the tiny gaps between the snow blocks. Now you have a sealed, airtight dome. The snow itself, with its millions of tiny air pockets, is the insulation. The interior ice glaze is the vapor barrier and the air seal. The temperature inside can be maintained at a comfortable 10 to 20 degrees Celsius, 50 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, with just body heat and a small lamp, while outside it is lethally cold. The difference is staggering. Furthermore, snow is an excellent sound insulator. Inside an igloo, the howling Arctic gale is reduced to a distant, muffled whisper. The world becomes silent, still, and safe. A final touch of brilliance is the entrance tunnel. The entrance to an igloo is never flush with the main chamber. It is always a low, long tunnel that dips down below the level of the sleeping platform. Since cold air is heavier than warm air, it sinks and pools in this entrance tunnel, acting as a cold sink. The warm air, being lighter, remains in the main living dome, creating a perfectly stratified environment. You literally crawl up and out of the cold and into the warmth. Sometimes a block of snow would be used as a door to seal the tunnel completely. In larger communal igloos, they might even build multiple connected domes with interlinking tunnels, creating an entire winter village under the snow. The coziness of an igloo is unique. It is a quiet, diffused, glowing warmth. The semi-translucent snow walls allow light to pass through, filling the space with a soft, ethereal glow.
The air is still.
You are wrapped in a profound silence, insulated from the raging elements outside by a wall of what was, moments before, just part of the hostile landscape. It is the ultimate alchemy, transforming the very agent of the cold into a powerful instrument of warmth and survival. It represents the pinnacle of living in harmony with one's environment, not by changing it, but by understanding its deepest properties and turning them to your advantage. We have journeyed from the communal longhouses of the forest to the portable tipis of the plains, to the massive adobe pueblos of the desert, and finally to the crystalline igloos of the Arctic. Each structure, in its own way, is a perfect response to its environment, but they all share common threads, a deep, intuitive understanding of physics, of materials, and of the simple, profound truth that warmth is about more than just temperature. It is about shelter from the wind, dry floors, a managed fire, fresh air without drafts, and the security of being with loved ones in a space that is not just safe, but comforting. It is the essence of coziness, achieved not through complex technology, but through wisdom, observation, and a respectful partnership with the natural world. This wisdom, born of necessity and refined over millennia, is perhaps one of the greatest architectural legacies ever bestowed upon this land. And in our modern search for sustainability and comfort, we would do well to look back at these ancient cozy homes, for they have many lessons yet to teach us. Our journey through the cozy winter homes of Native America has taken us from the forest longhouses to the plains tipis, the desert pueblos, and the Arctic igloos. We've seen how brilliant architectural forms, the dome, the cone, the massive wall, were harnessed to create shelters of profound comfort and efficiency. But a house is more than its shape. The true magic, the deep-seated coziness, resided in the details. It was in the unseen engineering, the meticulous management of the interior environment, and the daily rituals that transformed a structure from a mere shelter into a home. This is the story of what happened inside these walls, the science of air, the art of light, the culture of comfort, and the spiritual dimension that made these spaces truly alive. Let's return to the longhouse, but this time, let's step inside and breathe the air. We've discussed the smoke holes and how they were adjustable to control draft. But the quality of the air inside a longhouse, home to dozens of people and multiple fires, was a constant and critical concern. The solution was a sophisticated understanding of stack ventilation. The central fires created a powerful thermal plume, a column of hot air that wanted to rise rapidly. The smoke holes at the apex of the arched roof provided the exit for this plume. By carefully adjusting the covers on these holes, the occupants could fine-tune the draw, ensuring that smoke was pulled efficiently up and out, rather than spilling back into the living space. But what about fresh air? A completely sealed structure would become stuffy and oxygen depleted. The longhouse was far from airtight. The very nature of its construction, layers of bark lashed to a wooden frame, packed with fibrous insulation, meant that it breathed. Fresh air would infiltrate through countless tiny gaps and pores in the walls, particularly near the ground. This incoming cold air would then be warmed gradually as it mixed with the warmer interior air, preventing the harsh, localized drafts we associate with a leaky window in a modern home. This is a form of natural, distributed ventilation. The air change was constant but gentle, ensuring a supply of fresh air without creating a perceptible chill. Furthermore, the raised sleeping platforms were crucial here as well. The coldest, densest air would settle at floor level, while the sleeping inhabitants rested in a stratum of warmer, cleaner air above the dust and dampness of the ground. The air they breathed at night was the best in the house. Now consider the teepee and its brilliant double wall system. We described how it acts as a passive heat exchanger, pre-warming incoming air. But let's delve deeper into the control mechanisms. The two smoke flaps at the top, controlled by their long poles, were the primary control panel for the entire interior climate. On a calm, cold day, the flaps could be opened wide to create a strong updraft, ensuring all smoke was pulled out. But on a windy day, the situation became more complex. If the wind was blowing directly into the smoke hole, it would force smoke back down into the Tipi. The solution was to use the poles to angle the flaps as wind baffles. One flap could be raised as a windbreak, while the other was lowered to leeward, creating a low-pressure area that would actually suck the smoke out against the wind. This required a deep intuitive understanding of fluid dynamics. The women who owned and managed the Tipis could read the wind like a map and adjust their home's settings accordingly, maintaining a clear, warm, and comfortable interior in virtually any weather condition. The interior liner was another masterstroke of environmental control. It wasn't just for creating an air gap. It also served as a moisture barrier. The warmth inside the Tipi, generated by people and fire, would cause humidity from breath and cooking to condense on the cold outer cover. Without the liner, this condensation would drip back down onto the occupants. The liner intercepted this moisture. The condensation would form on the inner surface of the cold outer cover, and then the water would run down between the liner and the cover, to be absorbed by the ground at the base of the Tipi, keeping the inner living space dry. Dryness is a fundamental and often overlooked component of true coziness. Damp cold feels far more penetrating and uncomfortable than dry cold. The Tipi system expertly managed humidity, ensuring the interior remained warm and dry. Inside the Pueblo adobe structures, the environmental control was slower, more monumental, but no less brilliant. The massive walls acted as a giant humidity buffer. Adobe is hygroscopic, meaning it naturally absorbs and releases moisture from the air. During the cold winter, when the interior air was heated by fires and became drier, the walls would slowly release stored moisture, helping to maintain a comfortable humidity level and preventing the parched, stuffy feeling of modern forced air heating. Conversely, in times of higher humidity, the walls would absorb the excess. This natural regulation created a remarkably stable and comfortable atmospheric feeling, one that is difficult to replicate even with modern HVAC systems. Ventilation in these structures was also carefully managed. The small, strategically placed windows and doors minimized heat loss, but could be opened to cross-ventilate when necessary. Many Pueblo structures also incorporated what are known as T-shaped doors. While their exact symbolic meaning is debated, they also had a very practical function. The narrow bottom of the T was the actual passageway, minimizing the size of the opening and thus heat loss, while the wider top section allowed for more light and air to enter when a hide or cloth curtain was pulled aside. It was a simple but effective form of climate-adaptive architecture. Now, let's talk about light, for coziness is as much about atmosphere as it is about temperature. The management of light in these winter homes was an art form. In the longhouse, the only light sources were the central fires. This created a world of deep dynamic shadows. The curved, dark wooden ribs of the ceiling would disappear into blackness, while the firelight would illuminate the lower portions of the living platforms and the central aisle. This created a psychological effect known as prospect and refuge. People felt a sense of refuge in the semi-darkness of their family alcoves, while having a prospect view of the communal, well-lit fire and the activity around it. It's a lighting arrangement that humans are instinctively drawn to, one that feels secure and intimate. The flickering firelight would also gleam off the polished surfaces of pottery, baskets, and the natural oils on tanned hides, creating tiny points of reflected light that added to the rich, textured visual experience. In the teepee, the light was equally dramatic. During the day, with the smoke flaps adjusted, sunlight could stream in, illuminating the interior with a soft, diffused glow filtered through the semi-translucent bison hide. The hides, especially after being smoked during tanning, had a beautiful, warm, golden brown color that infused the entire space with a sunny hue, even on a gray winter day. At night, the central fire would project the shadows of the people and the tipi poles onto the sloping walls, creating a dynamic, dancing panorama. The tipi, in essence, became a kind of cinema of shadows, telling stories without words. The liner also played a role in light. Its lighter color, often the natural off-white of the hide's inner surface, helped reflect and diffuse light deeper into the living space, making it feel brighter and more open. The igloo offered a light experience unlike any other. During the day, the semi-translucent snow walls acted as a giant light diffuser. The entire structure would glow with a cool blue-white ethereal light, as if the moon were permanently shining inside. It was a light without a single discernible source, eliminating harsh shadows and creating a sense of serene, quiet unity. At night, a single blubber lamp, known as a kullik, would provide both heat and light. The flame burning rendered seal or whale fat would cast a warm yellow-orange glow against the glazed ice walls. The ice would refract and reflect this light, making the small space feel larger and filling it with a multitude of tiny, sparkling points of light, like stars embedded in the ceiling. The contrast between the cool daytime glow and the warm, intimate nighttime glow created a daily rhythm that was deeply connected to the natural world outside. Beyond the physics of air and light, the true coziness of these homes was woven from the fabric of daily life and cultural practice. Let's explore the domestic technologies that made these spaces functional and comfortable. First and foremost, bedding. We've mentioned furs, but this deserves a deeper appreciation. Bedding was a multi-layered system. The first layer on a sleeping platform or the tipi floor was often a thick mat of woven rushes, cattail leaves, or aromatic branches like sagebrush or cedar. These mats provided cushioning and a final insulating barrier from the cold ground or platform wood. They also had the benefit of being easily replaced when they became worn or soiled. On top of these mats went the furs. But not just one layer. A typical bed would consist of a heavy, thick fur robe as a bottom layer. Bison on the plains, bear or beaver in the forest, caribou in the subarctic. On top of this, people would sleep under another layer of softer furs. The most prized were often those with the densest, most luxurious underfur, like beaver or river otter. The direction of the fur mattered. Often, the bottom robe would be laid with the fur side down, to provide loft and insulation against the mat, while the top cover would have the fur side up, trapping body heat and providing a soft, warm surface against the skin. In the extreme cold of the Arctic, the Inuit used sleeping bags made of caribou skin, with the fur on the inside. 2 people would sleep naked in one bag, maximizing shared body heat, a practice that was a matter of survival. This multi-layered, strategic use of furs created a micro-environment of warmth that could withstand the most brutal cold. Then there was the issue of clothing, which was an extension of the home's coziness. Inside these warm shelters, people could shed their heavy outer winter garments. They would wear soft, comfortable clothing made of tanned deer or elk skin, or in the north, caribou. Often they would be barefoot on the warm fur robes, or wear soft moccasins. This ability to be lightly and comfortably dressed indoors while a blizzard raged outside is a quintessential part of the feeling of coziness. It represents a complete mastery of the environment, the creation of a personal summer in the heart of winter. Food and its preparation also contributed profoundly to the atmosphere. The long, slow process of cooking a stew in a pottery jar nestled in the embers of a fire would fill the air with rich, savory smells for hours. In the teepee, roasting meat on a spit over the fire or boiling water by dropping heated stones into a rawhide or stomach container created a sense of anticipation and well-being. The kullik lamp in the igloo was not just for light and heat. It was also a cooking stove, used to melt snow for water and to heat food. The smell of simmering meat and melting blubber, while perhaps unfamiliar to us, was the smell of security, of family, of life continuing in the most challenging of circumstances. The act of sharing a warm meal, the central ritual of the household, generated not just physical warmth from the hot food, but social and emotional warmth, binding the community together. We must also speak of the spiritual dimension, for these homes were not considered inert structures. They were living entities, imbued with spirit and meaning. For the peoples of the Longhouse, the structure itself represented the cosmos. The floor was the earth. The arched roof was the sky world. The central fires were the spiritual and physical heart of the community, their smoke carrying prayers to the spirit world through the smoke holes. To be inside the Longhouse was to be within a sacred, ordered universe, protected from the chaos of the outside world. The tipi was equally sacred. The floor represented the earth, the walls the sky, and the poles were the connecting link between the two, often seen as pathways for prayers. The very act of raising the tipi was a ritual reenactment of creation. The covering was often painted with sacred symbols, visions of the owner, protective spirits, or celestial bodies. These were not mere decorations. They were a spiritual blueprint, a way of aligning the home with the powers of the universe. To live in a tipi was to live within a sacred circle, a portable church and home combined. The Pueblo peoples saw their dwellings as an extension of the earth itself, literally and spiritually. They emerged into this world from the underworld, and their homes, built into the sides of mesas, echoed that primordial emergence. The kiva, the circular, wholly or partially underground ceremonial room, was the spiritual heart of the community, representing the place of origin. Its design, with a central fire pit and a sipapu, a small hole in the floor symbolizing the place of emergence, directly influenced the design of the homes above. To live in a pueblo was to be physically and spiritually rooted in the land. For the Inuit, the igloo, though temporary, was a sacred space. The snow was not just a material, it was a living element. The act of building an igloo required skill, respect, and a kind of conversation with the snow. Inside, the space was organized with strict social and spiritual protocol. The back of the igloo, opposite the door, was the place of honor for the elder or the head of the household. The kulik lamp, tended by the woman of the house, was the spiritual and physical center, its flame a fragile, cherished piece of the sun held captive during the long polar night. This spiritual understanding was not separate from the coziness. It was its very foundation. The sense of security and comfort was amplified 1,000-fold by the belief that one was living in a space that was spiritually aligned, protected, and sacred. It transformed the home from a physical fortress into a metaphysical one. The walls kept out the wind and cold, but the spiritual beliefs kept out fear and despair. This holistic integration of the practical and the spiritual is perhaps the most profound lesson these ancient homes have to teach us. Our modern pursuit of coziness often focuses solely on the material, a soft blanket, a warm drink, a flickering screen. But the coziness experienced in these indigenous homes was a full-sense, deeply rooted state of being, encompassing the body, the mind, and the spirit. It was a testament to the fact that the truest, most enduring comfort comes from living in harmony with our environment, with our community, and with the unseen world that gives meaning to it all. We have ventured deep into the architectural genius, the environmental engineering, and the profound cultural spirit that imbued the winter homes of Native America with a coziness that was both physical and metaphysical. We have felt the communal warmth of the longhouse, the dynamic efficiency of the tipi, the monumental stability of the pueblo, and the transformative alchemy of the igloo. But the story does not end in the historical past. The legacy of this ancient wisdom is not a relic to be admired in a museum. It is a living, breathing body of knowledge that is experiencing a powerful reawakening in our modern world. As we grapple with a climate crisis, a crisis of sustainability, and a deep, pervasive longing for connection and authentic comfort, we are turning our gaze back to these time-tested solutions, realizing that they hold keys to not only surviving the future, but thriving in it with a sense of place and purpose we have largely forgotten. This final part of our exploration will delve into the enduring impact of these indigenous building principles. We will see how they are being rediscovered and integrated into contemporary architecture, how they inform our modern understanding of physics and material science, and how the very philosophy of coziness they embody offers a vital antidote to the anxieties of our hyper-modern, disconnected age. We will explore the specific lessons each structure teaches us, and we will imagine a future where the line between ancient wisdom and cutting-edge innovation is blurred into irrelevance, because both are dedicated to the same goal: creating harmonious, sustainable, and deeply comfortable places for people to live. Let us begin with the longhouse and its lessons for community and material use. The modern world is characterized by isolation. We live in single-family homes, often barely knowing our neighbors. We commute in solitary cars, work in cubicles, and entertain ourselves on personal screens. The longhouse stands as a powerful testament to a different way of being. Its very structure was a physical manifestation of community. The shared roof, the central fires, the open plan that still respected family units, all of it fostered a culture of mutual support and interdependence. In an era of a recognized loneliness epidemic, the longhouse model offers a provocative alternative. We are seeing its echoes today in the growing co-housing movement, where private homes are clustered around extensive shared spaces, common houses with large kitchens, dining areas, and workshops. The goal is to recreate that village-like sense of community, to share resources, and to combat the isolation of contemporary life. The longhouse teaches us that coziness can be scaled up. It is not just an individual experience, but a communal one. The warmth of a shared meal, the sound of children playing together in a safe and closed space, the security of knowing your community is literally under the same roof. These are social insulators as powerful as any cattail fluff. Furthermore, the longhouse's use of materials is a masterclass in local, biodegradable, and sustainable sourcing. Every component came from the immediate environment and, at the end of its life, would return to it without leaving a trace of pollution. The wood would rot, the bark would decompose, the grass insulation would break down. This stands in stark contrast to the modern building industry, one of the largest contributors to landfill waste, filled with synthetic insulations, vinyl sidings, and treated woods that can take centuries to decompose. The cradle-to-cradle design philosophy, which seeks to eliminate the very concept of waste by designing products and systems that can be fully reintegrated into biological or technical cycles, is a direct modern articulation of the principle that the longhouse builders lived by instinctively. Architects and builders are now looking back to these materials. Hempcrete, a biocomposite material made from the inner woody core of the hemp plant mixed with a lime-based binder, is a modern analog to the packed earth and fiber walls of old. It is carbon negative, breathable, and provides excellent thermal and acoustic insulation. Straw bale construction is another resurrection of an ancient principle, using the waste product of grain production to create super-insulated, incredibly quiet walls. The longhouse didn't just use natural materials, it used waste materials, moss, grass, cattail fluff, and transformed them into high-performance building components. This is a level of sustainable thinking we are only now, in our age of crisis, beginning to desperately emulate. The Tipi's legacy is one of dynamic adaptability and aerodynamic efficiency. We live in a world of increasing volatility. Climate change is causing more extreme weather events. Economic shifts demand mobility, and the very nature of work is becoming untethered from fixed locations. The static permanent McMansion of the late 20th century is beginning to feel like an anachronism, both environmentally and socially. The Tipi offers a philosophy of lightweight, portable, and highly responsive architecture. Its principles are being explored in the realm of emergency shelter design. After natural disasters, the need for rapid, deployable, and dignified shelter is paramount. Modern tent designs are increasingly incorporating the double-wall ventilation principles of the Tipi to manage condensation and temperature, a critical factor in maintaining health and comfort in temporary housing situations. The conical shape, perfected for wind shedding, is studied by engineers designing structures for extreme environments, from research stations in Antarctica to potential habitats on Mars. But the Tipi's influence goes beyond literal tents. The entire concept of tiny homes and minimalist living is a spiritual descendant of the Tipi philosophy. It is an embrace of sufficiency over excess, of quality over quantity. The Tipi was a lesson in having exactly what you needed, and having it be of the highest quality and functionality. Every item within had a purpose and a place. This intentionality creates a profound sense of order and calm, a different kind of coziness that comes from the absence of clutter and the presence of purpose. Furthermore, the Tipi's efficient use of energy, the way its design amplified the heating potential of a single small fire, is a direct challenge to our energy-profligate ways. Modern passive house design, which aims to create buildings that require minimal energy for heating or cooling, relies on super-insulation and air tightness, but also on heat recovery ventilation systems. The Tipi's double-wall system was a primitive, passive form of heat recovery. It understood that you shouldn't just throw warm air away. You should use it to precondition the incoming fresh air. This principle is now a cornerstone of high-performance building science. We are learning once again to see our homes not as sealed boxes to be heated, but as dynamic systems that interact intelligently with the external environment. The Pueblo Adobe dwelling's gift to the future is its profound understanding of thermal mass and passive solar design. In an era of energy insecurity and a need to reduce our carbon footprint, the idea of letting the sun heat our homes for free is more compelling than ever. The massive walls of the Pueblo are the archetype for what is now called passive solar thermal mass. Modern sustainable buildings often incorporate trombe walls, a south-facing wall made of dark, high thermal mass material like concrete, stone or adobe, behind a layer of glass. The sun heats the mass through the glass, and that heat is then radiated into the building hours later. This is the exact same principle used in the Pueblo, just formalized and optimized with modern materials. The orientation of the Pueblo villages, their compact form to reduce surface area, and their small strategically placed windows are all principles now encoded in sustainable design guidelines worldwide. We are relearning that the form of a building is its first and most important environmental system. The use of earth itself as a building material is also experiencing a massive resurgence. Rammed earth construction, where a mixture of damp earth, clay, and a small amount of stabilizer, like lime or cement, is compacted into forms to create walls, results in structures that have the same beautiful, strided appearance and phenomenal thermal performance as ancient adobe. These buildings stay cool in summer and warm in winter, with minimal need for supplemental energy. They are fireproof, pest-proof, and have a timeless, organic beauty that connects the inhabitants directly to the land they live on. The coziness of a modern rammed earth home is the same as that of a pueblo. It is a deep, quiet, grounded comfort. It is the feeling of being held by the earth, of being in a space that has a natural, stable rhythm, unruffled by the frantic fluctuations of the outside world. This re-engagement with earth building is part of a broader movement towards biophilic design, the concept that humans have an innate tendency to seek connections with nature and other forms of life. Living within walls made of the very soil you walk on satisfies this deep-seated need in a way that a drywall partition never can. And then we have the igloo, the ultimate lesson in using the perceived enemy as your greatest ally. The igloo's philosophy is one of radical contextuality. It does not import materials. It uses the most abundant, immediate material available, and through intelligence transforms its fundamental nature. This is perhaps the most critical lesson for a future of resource constraints. We must learn to see the waste streams of our society and our environment not as problems, but as building blocks. The igloo teaches us to work with climate, not against it. Its principles are being applied in the most advanced areas of material science. Aerogel, one of the best insulating materials ever created by humans, is sometimes called frozen smoke. It is a solid material that is over 90% air, a man-made version of the snow matrix that gives the igloo its insulating power. Scientists creating insulating foams and geotextiles are constantly striving to mimic the microstructure of natural materials like snow, wood, and bone, structures that have been optimized by millions of years of evolution for strength and efficiency. The igloo's form, the dome, is also being re-examined. Monolithic domes constructed from a single piece of material are incredibly strong, energy efficient, and resistant to natural disasters like hurricanes and earthquakes. The spherical shape has the least surface area for a given volume, minimizing heat loss and gain. Modern architects are exploring monolithic dome construction using airforms and sprayed-on concrete, creating homes that are safe, durable, and extraordinarily cheap to heat and cool. The igloo, built in a few hours with a snow knife, is the spiritual ancestor of these futuristic structures. It proves that the most elegant solutions are often the simplest, and that true innovation lies not in complexity, but in a deep understanding of the properties of one's materials and the forces of one's environment. Beyond the specific architectural lessons, there is a broader, more philosophical legacy from these homes that is perhaps the most valuable of all. It is the legacy of coziness as a holistic state of being. Our modern pursuit of comfort is often superficial and commercialized. We buy a weighted blanket, an essential oil diffuser, a streaming subscription, and we call it self-care. There is nothing wrong with these things, but the coziness of the indigenous winter home was something far deeper and more resilient. It was earned. It was the result of skill, knowledge, and collective effort. The warmth was not just a temperature setting. It was the satisfaction of a well-tended fire. The light was not just a bulb. It was the dynamic, living flicker of a flame. The shelter was not just a roof. It was a sacred space, imbued with stories, prayers, and the presence of ancestors. This earned coziness generates a profound sense of agency and resilience. When you know how to build your own shelter, manage your own climate, and create your own comfort from the raw materials of the earth, you are unshakable. You are not a passive consumer of comfort, but an active creator of it. This is a power that our modern, convenience-driven world has largely stripped from us. We are vulnerable to power outages, supply chain disruptions, and economic fluctuations, The knowledge embodied in the longhouse, the tipi, the pueblo, and the igloo is a form of empowerment. It is the knowledge that we can provide for ourselves and our communities, that we can be comfortable and secure through our own ingenuity and labor. This reawakening to indigenous knowledge is not about romanticizing the past or rejecting technology. It is about synthesis. It is about taking the profound, time-tested wisdom of the first architects of this land and combining it with the best of our modern science and technology. It is about building homes that are not only energy neutral but energy positive, that are not only safe from the elements but actively contribute to the health of the environment, that are not just places to sleep but sanctuaries that nurture the human spirit. Imagine a modern suburban home, but designed with the communal spirit of a longhouse. It might be a multi-generational compound with a central shared hearth space, a kitchen, dining, and living area where the family gathers, while private wings provide individual retreat. It would be built with hempcrete walls and a living roof planted with native grasses and mosses, echoing the longhouse's integration with the forest. Its ventilation would be a modern energy recovery system that mimics the gentle, breathable quality of the longhouse walls. Imagine a modern apartment built with the principles of the Tipi. It would be in a dense urban area, a lightweight prefabricated module that could be assembled and disassembled with minimal waste. Its facade would be a dynamic double skin that opens and closes like the Tipi smoke flaps, responding to the sun and wind to regulate temperature and air quality naturally. Inside, the space would be open and adaptable, with built-in storage and multifunctional furniture, embodying the tipi's minimalist efficiency and respect for every object. Imagine a modern community designed with the wisdom of the pueblo. It would be a cluster of earth-sheltered homes built into a south-facing slope, their massive rammed earth walls storing the sun's heat in winter and providing cool respite in summer. The community would be laid out to maximize social interaction with shared courtyards and gardens, creating a modern village that fosters the same deep sense of connection and mutual support. The homes would be oriented to the path of the sun, with carefully calculated overhangs that block the high summer sun but admit the low winter sun, a precise, technological expression of the pueblo's intuitive solar alignment. Imagine a research station in a harsh environment built with the logic of the igloo. It might be 3D printed from local regolith on the Moon or Mars, its dome shape providing strength and radiation shielding. Its walls would be composed of a manufactured aerogel, creating a super-insulated shell that turns the extreme external cold into a non-issue. Inside, a closed-loop life support system would mimic the igloo's efficient use of every resource, where waste is not waste, but an input for another process. This is the future that the cozy winter homes of Native America point us toward. It is a future not of austerity, but of abundance, an abundance of comfort, community, and connection. It is a future where our buildings are not separate from nature, but are partners in a healthy ecosystem. It is a future where the concept of home is redefined not as a financial asset or a status symbol, but as a sanctuary, a source of resilience, and a vessel for our most cherished relationships. The howling wind outside the longhouse, the vast emptiness surrounding the tipi, the desert extremes beyond the pueblo walls, the lethal cold enclosing the igloo. These were not just challenges to be overcome, they were the essential counterpoint that gave the interior warmth its meaning. The coziness was so profound precisely because the world outside was so formidable. In our modern climate-controlled lives, we have largely eliminated that counterpoint. We have made the entire world, in a sense, lukewarm. And in doing so, we may have diminished our capacity to experience true, deep, earned comfort. The legacy of these ancient homes is an invitation to re-engage with the world. It is a call to step outside the bubble of artificial control and to rediscover the joy of creating our own warmth, our own light, and our own shelter. It is an invitation to build, not just with wood and stone, but with community, with story, and with spirit. To learn from the longhouse is to remember that we are stronger together. To learn from the tipi is to embrace adaptability and intentional simplicity. To learn from the pueblo is to seek rootedness and harmony with the rhythms of the earth. To learn from the igloo is to see the potential for beauty and utility in the most unexpected places. This is more than a history lesson. It is a blueprint for a better, warmer, more cozy future. A future built on a foundation of respect for the land, for its resources, for each other, and for the timeless wisdom of those who learned, through millennia of winter, how to build not just a house but a home, the fire in the hearth of the longhouse, the flame of the quillic in the igloo. These lights were kept burning through the longest nights. They were a promise that the sun would return, that the community would endure, that life was precious and warm. That promise, that enduring cozy light, is their gift to us. It is up to us to keep it burning,